give a warm round of digital applause to my guest today, Mark Luber, Chief Product Officer at Equifax, United States Information Solutions. Mark, welcome to this virtual fireside chat.
Thanks, Cameron. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so we've been together in this digital identity space for quite a while now. But you in particular, have not to date you too much, but a few decades of experience working in the industry. Before we get into what you're building at Equifax and your perspective on the current landscape, would love to hear just a little bit more about your career journey through the digital identity space and how you came to be a CPO over at Equifax.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. So, right, no one until you has suggested that I've been in the industry for a couple of decades, but that's true. Just been a pretty quick journey through that time. I started working on big data before I knew I was supposed to call it big data. I think maybe people would have laughed at me if I had suggested that at the time, but it's been super interesting. And I've been working on identity the whole time. It's just essential to everything I've done. When I reflect on my career, one thing that stands out is in our world, it's so important to be kind of a student of a lot of different fields, right? And that's one of the interesting things for me. You want to be comfortable with finance, understand why the investments you're making, make sense. You want to understand, at least at some level, the legal and the privacy implications of the work that you're doing. Of course, we're all in sales at the end of the day. You don't want to be afraid of a ROC curve, right? You want to get comfortable with analytics as well. So it's that multidisciplinary approach to identity and the information services generally that's been really exciting. That's really kept me going. A couple other reflections. One is just so different from being, at school and university. You never solve anything, right? There's this just pace of continuous improvement. And that's like the best you can do, right? Is just to continuously improve what you're working on, but you're not actually ever, getting to that resolution, which is super interesting. Again, keeping me super engaged. So I love that. And, last thing I'd say about my personal career, I've surprised myself about how much the purpose matters. When we're working in this space, information services, focus on identity. I started out finding bad guys, helping government and law enforcement in my first job with big data. But ever since then, I've always connected my work back to how does this help society? How does this people access financial services in my role here at Equifax? And that has turned out to be more important than maybe I would have realized coming into my commercial roles. Industry overall, holy cow! I mean, innovation is rapid and rampant, and it never stops, right? And there's no end in sight. We're getting smarter every day. We're figuring out how to use the cloud to do even larger data processes and data management than ever before. There's new machine learning and AI techniques, and then even when you think you're getting close to solving a problem, there's all new types of data exhausts that come out, right? We're using new types of technologies that create new types of imprints. And so that becomes super interesting, and you have to solve, all of our problems all over again. So it just never ends. And I love that. And that's why the industry's kind of kept my attention. The other thing I'd say is our technology approach across the industry will also improve, I believe, security, privacy, and consumer transparency going forward. And so it's the juxtaposition of doing that work while improving experiences that I think is really going to drive our industry forward.
That so much that I could expand on there. I thought, you mentioning that you were kind of working in big data before you realized it was big data. I always like to joke that, I've been working in digital identity for almost my entire career and just didn't even know that I was working in digital identity. I was working at the New York Stock Exchange as an analyst, and then I was working in a couple different banks. On what you would previously have considered pure, risk and compliance work, specifically around, digital transformation, customer onboarding, know your customer AML, all of that was digital identity. We just didn't talk about it as such at the time. And, in the past 5 years since joining OWI, I've realized like, oh, actually, I think I have, more experience in digital identity than I even realized.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to tie that to where we are right now, obviously COVID, the last 12 months have really been unlike anything any of us have ever seen, certainly in our lifetimes, with regard to just kind of some fundamental shifts in a workplace environment, in how consumers are interacting with businesses and work platforms. You at Equifax are obviously at the cutting edge of, interfacing with your customers, hearing what they're concerned about and how their priorities are shifting due to COVID-19 and really this earthquake of, a tectonic shift in the landscape. What have you, how have those customer priorities shifted? How has that changed how you're approaching the problems that you're looking to solve at Equifax?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. And I actually started at Equifax last March, right? Just as the world was fundamentally shifting, and coming into Equifax during that time made me even more sure this was a really cool place to be, because our customers, the government, was looking to us to help them. So, I mean, first of all, every business is now at least an omni-channel business, right? We don't have to say that anymore. That's just default. Every business needs to be online, needs to be digital. And now every one of these businesses need to understand who they're interacting with again, if they weren't already kind of working on this, if they weren't already digital. And so that migration, we hear loud and clear from our customers. Even if they already had an online presence and were doing some business online, right? Of course, they're shifting, almost all of their business online. And I don't think that's going to go away. It'll, recede a little bit, but everyone's online. A significant amount of their business is online, and they're looking for us to help them identify their customers and help them through, whatever process they're working on. And I think it's our job in the data and technology space to democratize incredible digital experiences, right? The largest institutions in the world can invest, right, and develop their own digital experience. And then for the rest of the economy, it's our responsibility to make that possible. So that's what's super cool. Like, so, and I love being here for that. McKinsey published something recently they're talking about the effects of COVID in 2021 and commerce. But I think an interesting soundbite was that in the first half of 2020, we saw an increase in e-commerce in the U.S. that was equivalent to that of the previous 10 years, right? So we had 10 years of growth in 6 months. So that's incredible. It's just so dramatic. People have been trying to stop saying unprecedented, but I think we should keep saying that. And as I said, I think that shift to online experiences will obviously stick, with a little bit maybe receding over time.
Yeah, I really like that phrase that you used, kind of democratizing, because I think it is a bit lost in the shuffle that, with this transition to, digital omni-channel experiences, if you are someone who cannot participate in this economy for whatever reason, like, you are really going to be left behind. And whether you want to call it democratization, whether you want to call it inclusion, making sure that the widest possible swath of consumers is able to transact on these platforms, is able to, have a digital identity in whatever form that may be, whether it's through traditional financial services, whether it's through alternative financial services, buy now, pay later, making sure that they can conduct these e-commerce transactions, I think is really critical. And it's a conversation that I think has not necessarily gotten enough attention when we talk about what these shifts in how business is conducted mean. And to your point, look, there are the Googles, the Facebooks of the world that have the scale that they can really afford to kind of go it their own way, develop a digital identity that can stay, within their platform. But for everybody else, especially if you're looking to compete with a company like Amazon in the e-commerce realm, you need partners who can offer you a chance to get that scale and be able to serve the full breadth of, the American market, because, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, if we want to kind of talk in the, ethical sense of like inclusivity. But additionally, look, if you can't provide that customer experience to all your customers or potential customers, someone else is going to do it for you, and you're going to be leaving dollars on the table. And I think there's both that ethical kind of moral argument, but also just pure dollars and cents of, we need to be able to do this to remain competitive with these megalith platforms.
Yeah. I talked a few minutes ago about, how important purpose is to me and the work that we do. And, small businesses are so important to our economy, society, people running these small businesses. Like, it's our job here with technology to support that.
So to that end, you're obviously again on the front lines of hearing what your customers are looking for, and what challenges they're facing. What would you say right now is the biggest challenge that your customers are facing today that they come to Equifax looking for assistance with?
Yeah, absolutely. Two things. Very much the digital transformation of their businesses. So sometimes, they don't. Sometimes a business won't even know what questions to ask, right? Just it's sort of, how do I get started? What are the what are the watch outs, right? How do I identify customers and consumers and help them gain access to services? So, it's such a big sort of box of questions and challenges to solve. So the digital transformation is number one. How do I optimize for customer experience while also managing fraud and keeping my business healthy? The other thing, I would say that's interesting and a little bit, everything's based on identity at the end of the day, but above and beyond that is the speed at which the economy's moving and changing, and people's positions, in the economy is changing just so quickly, right? And so our customers are looking for more up-to-date information, right here and now. They don't want to pull a report at the end of the month to learn about their customers, right? They want to know what can they do for their customers, the moment that customer's experience or position has changed, and how can we help our customers right now, not days, weeks, or months from now. So that speed of information and the need for speed and information is just astonishing.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about the digital identity space is that the further you dig, the more you realize that identity is everywhere. I like to analogize identity as almost this aquifer, if you will, that's flowing horizontally beneath all these market segments. And I suppose that ties in with a digging analogy in the sense of, like, if you dig down deep enough, you're going to hit water,
Yep.
most places, and often that water is identity. Whether you're talking about a business trying to understand, okay, who are the customers who are interested in my goods or services, then transition that to, okay, how can I effectively reach those customers? How can I know that who I'm hitting with advertising is coming into my platform, understanding whether or not they're converting. And then each step along that further customer journey, whether it's appropriately understanding their credit risk when you want to do something like extend them store credit, whether it's understanding their fraud risk to make sure that they're not going to initiate a chargeback, for example, and then further along that life cycle, being able to maintain those touch points with them as their relationship with your company matures, ongoing account maintenance, continuing marketing, supporting them through every step of the way. Digital identity is kind of at the heart of all of those steps. And if you can't understand who somebody is and their relationship, that whole chain kind of falls apart.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just the other day when I talk about investments we're making in identity at Equifax, I make it clear we're not making investments in an identity business. We're making investments in Equifax. The whole platform runs on knowing, who you're interacting with.
And to that end, to piggyback on some recent news, your team just completed the acquisition of Count. For those who aren't familiar, Count is an AI-driven fraud prevention and digital identity platform. It's one of the largest acquisitions in Equifax history. Why was this the right time to bring these two companies together?
Yeah, and it's a great series of questions and how we get to this point and reflecting what we are just talking about, right? The digital transformation in the world is incredible over the last 12 months. And so, whether you're a bank, an e-commerce provider, a car dealer, right? Today, right, all consumers expect to have an online experience and a better online experience every day, right? That continuous improvement concept. So the acquisition of Count was incredibly important to support and help drive that digital transformation. So you have the digital identity from Count, and we can marry that, right, with the intelligence coming out of Equifax to create the best possible experience when you are online. And the omni-channel experience. We talked about omni-channel, right? Now you have offline and online digital signals to help address that customer and their needs, at the right place at the right time where the customer asks to be addressed.
Yeah, I think in speaking to that digital identity narrative, a platform like Count can be really powerful in that, in the sense that, to your point, look, the benchmark that consumers are using to compare their experience with a given platform is ultimately, out of your control. The consumer, by and large, doesn't care, like, hey, I'm opening a credit card application versus I'm hailing an Uber versus I'm checking out on Amazon. To the average person, they think most of these things are kind of analogous. It's like, I'm filling out a form. I need to make a company understand who I am. Why is doing activity A not the same as doing activity B? Like, it's on my smartphone. I'm putting some information in, who I am, my name, my address. Why can't this just work? And if you can't manage to kind of keep up with the digital Joneses with regard to that experience, you are going to get left behind. And I think, a platform like Count, and the fact that they can be pulling in some of these attributes that are not necessarily reliant on the consumer inputting the data themselves, can really smooth out a lot of those bumps. At OWI, a lot of times we talk about the intersectionality of the level of identity assurance that you can get on a given transaction on one axis, and the amount of friction you're providing the consumer on the other axis. And obviously, up and to the right is the lowest possible friction, the highest level of assurance. And I think we are seeing all points in the space converge on that. And a platform like Count, I think, can be a really key asset in reaching that, that nirvana state of, we hassle you very, very minimally, and yet we can provide the end platform an extremely high level of assurance that it is, in fact, Cameron D'Ambrosi on the other end of this transaction.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of interesting points there. One was of financial services and e-commerce, generally speaking, right? There's not the separation that there used to be in this new world, particularly with some of the exciting fintech work that's going on, right? As you purchase services or goods, there's finance components constantly, right, in that path. There's options, and vice versa. As you're engaged in financial services, there's constantly options for additional buys and services, right? So it's actually, you bring together Count that is oriented towards e-commerce experiences, digital experience, and Equifax with their expertise in supporting financial services and those decisions. That is us, kind of really skating even past where the puck's going to be as far as supporting that convergence. That we can see hints of now, but it's gonna get a lot bigger in the future. Identity, by the way, another point you touched on a little bit that I think is interesting is this level of friction and kind of working through that. And I believe that with capabilities like Count, where you're seeing just such velocity of data, right? At Count, we talk about 32 billion interactions a year. That constant sort of check-in of identity gives us confidence still in a frictionless way to support that next transaction from that consumer. And that's super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that networked aspect is something that we've really seen emerge as kind of a key requirement in the digital identity space when you're talking about low friction. Can you take advantage of all these previous touch points to stitch together this tapestry of both probabilistic and deterministic data elements that again can get that assurance level as high as is required for a given use case without overwhelming the customer with friction. I think it remains true that in some ways fraud has become a bit of a boogeyman for practitioners in the identity space. And maybe not enough attention is being paid to what is the cost of excessive friction, and really dialing in, that slider, if you will, to make sure that, you are not costing yourself $2 in incremental revenue for every dollar of fraud that you're preventing. Is calculus that I think all digital platforms should be taking into account. That's not to say that fraud rings and the increasingly sophisticated skill sets of fraudsters should not be a concern. But I don't think it necessarily has to be an existential threat, and you do need to make sure that you are not losing, throwing the weed out with the chaff, I guess, to abuse a farming analogy. Not that I've ever picked a scythe up myself.
Well, in product management, you'll hear people talk as a product manager. Within our discipline, I'm trying to delight our customer, right? And so what we're trying to do with our capabilities, and particularly the integrated capabilities, is help our customers delight their customer. And that's where we start. We of course want to support, fraud protection, but let's start with delighting the customer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, it's been really exciting to see that mentality kind of trickle out throughout the broader space. I think, Apple has really been a pioneer in the sense of putting the customer first. And it's been really exciting to see that mentality kind of take hold across all these different industries. Because for a while, to some degree, depending on the market vertical you were in, it did feel like there was a bit more of an adversarial relationship. But I think Silicon Valley in general and the UX that all of these different platforms have provided their customers has really made it, it's not a nice to have, it's not a P1, P2 requirement. It's P0 that delight be, front and center in your user experience.
Totally. Awesome.
So if you have a couple more minutes, would love for you to stick around and answer some of the audience QA that's been coming in, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's do it.
So first question here. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for platforms that are looking to expand their presence? I'll try and channel that a little bit more. We talked about delighting your customer. We've talked about omni-channel and digital transformation and the impact that these are having across segments. If you are at a company that is looking to kind of revamp your approach to the customer experience, what is a good place to start, and where is the biggest opportunity to kind of get the most bang for your buck in terms of driving that delight and maybe rethinking your overall digital identity strategy?
Yeah. Interesting question. So, first, I think you want to be really sort of expansive in how you think about approaching that problem, right? This is not a technology problem or a data science problem. It's also a user experience opportunity and an opportunity to get creative on exactly how you're engaging with the customers, right? Think about collecting data, for instance. The best and having quality data, the best place to do that is up front during that engagement with the customer, not fixing things on the back end. So you just got to be really sort of expansive. I think I mentioned earlier being multidisciplinary in this space when you're approaching those opportunities. So I definitely think that's the first opportunity when you're rethinking your identity, your digital identity strategy. Like it's back to no, what's the sort of customer experience? And then how does digital identity support that? The other thing I'd say is along those same lines, like think about actually what industry that you're trying to disrupt. I mean, I think we're all hopefully trying to be disruptive in some way or another. And I mean, the world today is more disruptive than ever in certain economies like fintech and There's insure tech, there's reg tech, regulatory technology. Gig work is incredibly disruptive. It's an incredibly interesting time to be in this space. Digital identity is supporting it all, but I really try to be outside in, so try to figure out the problems I'm trying to solve for my customer and their customer first, and then how is identity going to support that. So that's where I would start.
And next question, from a regulatory perspective, what impact, if any, do you foresee, the increasingly strict kind of data privacy and consent landscape having on, this broader industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to ensure. I mentioned it earlier. Strong commitments to security, privacy, and then even transparency. And I think those are all, goals that we should, step up and meet. And so, when we're doing work that meets those obligations and even goes beyond those, whatever obligations exist, and actually creates value for customers, creates value for consumers, right? Those businesses are going to survive.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that, selfishly, I guess to my own end, I think consent is part of that delight we talked about. Consumers' expectations to be informed directly, like what information are you collecting from me, and how is that going to be used? I think really fits directly into that mandate to delight your customers. And I think we've seen time and time again, when you look at both, empirical data of how consumers interact with platforms, as well as, research and surveys. When you tell someone, why am I asking you for this information? How am I going to store it? What am I going to do with it? And why do I need it? People are generally pretty welcoming of giving the information required. It's like, okay, I want to access, a buy now, pay later loan. I'm going to take this information from you. Here's what I'm going to do with it. We're going to use it to determine if we can let you buy this pair of sneakers. And you're going to be out the door and on your way, and you're going to get the shoes you want. And I think people generally understand that there is a give take on the data side. Where you get into troubles if people feel like they've been lied to or manipulated or kind of coerced into providing something that they didn't want to, or that you're using it in a way that they do not feel sufficiently informed of.
What's interesting is when you get comfortable with that, right, being very transparent about what you're collecting and why, you can actually collect more data, right? You can ask more questions. I mean, I think about, we launched some capabilities that support access to bank transaction data. And, it's probably a decade ago that you couldn't imagine like that sort of interaction where a company is saying, well, if you give us access to your, bank information, we can provide you better, more appropriate, the right offer at the right time, right? And that is becoming a much bigger opportunity. And you see particularly fintechs there again, being very transparent and asking for that information, because consumers understand that once that's provided, additional services open up to them.
All right. I do want to be respectful of your time here. I'm sure you have places to go and people to see, but maybe we could squeeze one last question in. We have some folks asking what I consider to be my favorite question to ask, so I have to do it to you. I do know you have your crystal ball with you. Would love for you to dust that off and make some predictions for the direction of the market over the next year or so. Obviously, huge caveat. 2021, we had if you had Texas Blizzard on your bingo card, go ahead and collect those winnings. But would love to hear your thoughts more generally on what we can expect to see in the broader identity space.
Yeah, so I'll certainly be beating the drum of what we call digital identity trust. Like, I think that's going to be much more common, more commonly understood. Digital identity trust, digital identity trust. And what do we mean by trust? Well, again, that's that move away from fraud, and to creating a great customer experience first. Using identity to start with establishing a great experience for customers, consumers, businesses, small businesses, with the side effect of protecting than protecting from fraud and the like. So digital identity trust, I think, is going to be just this huge topic, and it's going to become a lot more common in our space, and probably actually beyond, um, as we get everyone to understand, how the work that we do in identity just really opens up opportunities for commercial success.
Beautiful. I couldn't agree more, and I'm really excited to see what this next year brings. You know, I'm apologies in advance. I'm going to say unprecedented. It has been an unprecedented time for the digital identity sector, and I think, look, in as much as there can be a silver lining to something like a global pandemic, I think we have seen the acceleration of adoption of some of these digital identity technologies as one of the few benefits, if you will, of everyone having to be stuck at home during this time. So curious to see if these trends continue accelerating.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Mark, hey, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Always great connecting with you. Please be well, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, this is great. Talk to you soon, Cameron.